Modern dating is terrifying, not because of rejection, but because you never truly know who you're meeting. This story isn't about love, it's about obsession. And the night one girl realized her date wasn't just charming, he was watching her long before they met. Welcome to Hollow Testament. Turn the lights down and listen closely. Story number one. If I hadn't trusted my instincts that day, I honestly don't know where I'd be right now. Probably not here, writing this, that's for sure. It started, like so many things, with a dating app. Not Tinder, something a little more niche, geared toward people who were, shall we say, alternative. I was fresh out of a messy breakup, feeling vulnerable and craving connection, but also wanting something a little different. That's where I found Silas. His profile was intriguing: dark poetry, obscure band references, pictures of him looking brooding in graveyards. He described himself as a night owl and seeker of the esoteric. A little on the nose, maybe, but I was drawn to the mystery. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly articulate and engaging. He asked me about my fears, my dreams, the things that kept me up at night. It was intense, but also captivating. He made me feel seen, understood in a way that no one else had. After a few weeks of messaging, he suggested we meet. He proposed a picnic at an old cemetery on the outskirts of town. Red flag number one, probably, but I was blinded by the allure of the unconventional. I told myself it was just a quirky date, a fun way to break the monotony of everyday life. The day of the picnic was overcast, adding to the already eerie atmosphere. As I drove to the cemetery, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I almost turned back, but the thought of facing Silas's potential disappointment kept me going. Um, he was waiting for me at the entrance, dressed in a long black coat despite the mild weather, face, piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. He greeted me with a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He was so weird. He led me through the maze of gravestones to a secluded spot beneath an ancient oak tree. He had spread out a black blanket and laid out an array of strange looking snacks: black bread, dark cheeses, and a bottle of red wine that looked suspiciously thick. The picnic started off awkwardly. Silas talked about morbid topics: death, decay, the ephemeral nature of existence. I tried to steer the conversation towards lighter subjects, but he always brought it back to the darkness. He had a captivating, almost hypnotic way of speaking that made it hard to look away. As the afternoon wore on, Silas started to get more personal. He asked me about my past relationships, my insecurities, the things I regretted most in life. He listened intently, nodding and making sympathetic noises. It felt like he was trying to dig into my soul, to uncover something hidden deep within me. Then he started talking about rituals. He mentioned ancient practices, sacrifices, and the power of the occult. He spoke of tapping into hidden energies, of unlocking the secrets of the universe. The more he talked, the more uncomfortable I became. My instincts were screaming at me to leave. He took my hand, his touch cold and clammy. "You have a darkness within you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I can feel it. It's waiting to be unleashed." I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip tightened. His eyes were fixed on mine, and I felt like I was drowning in their depths. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice now a low, hypnotic drone. "I can help you embrace it. We can do it together." That's when I finally snapped. Something inside me broke, and I realized the danger I was in. I yanked my hand away from his, stood up, and screamed, "No!" Silas's face contorted in anger. The mask of charm and mystery slipped away, revealing something ugly and sinister beneath. "You can't escape it," he hissed. "It's part of you now." I didn't wait to hear any more. I turned and ran, stumbling through the gravestones, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear Silas behind me, his footsteps echoing through the cemetery. I made it to my car, fumbled with the keys, and finally managed to start the engine. I sped out of the cemetery, not stopping until I reached the safety of my own apartment. I locked the doors, closed the curtains, and huddled on my couch, shaking and sobbing. I couldn't shake the feeling that Silas was still out there, watching me. I spent the next few days in a state of paranoia. I avoided going out, changed my phone number, and deleted my dating profile. I told a few close friends about what happened, but they dismissed it as a bad date, a creepy encounter. No one seemed to understand the depth of my fear. A few weeks later, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a single object, a photograph of me taken at the cemetery with my eyes scratched out, and that was the final straw. I went to the police and filed a report. They took my statement, but said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. I never saw Silas again, but the experience changed me forever. It taught me to trust my instincts, to listen to the little voice inside that warns of danger. I realized that not all darkness is romantic or intriguing. Some darkness is just evil. If I hadn't trusted my instincts that day, if I had succumbed to Silas's twisted allure, I don't know what would have happened. I shudder to think of the possibilities. Now I try to listen to that little voice and try my best to stay away from creeps and dark places. So be sure to trust your instincts. They are there for a reason. I still have nightmares about Silas and what could have happened. Story number 2. I really do wish I could forget what happened that day. The memory is like a persistent hum, always there, vibrating just beneath the surface. I was fresh out of a bad breakup, and my friend Sarah, bless her heart, convinced me to try this new dating app called Meet Cute. The premise was simple: short, personality based prompts instead of endless selfies. I figured, why not? What did I have to lose? I matched with this guy named Alex. He seemed normal, a little nerdy maybe, which was actually kind of endearing. He liked old movies, hiking, and craft beer, all things I enjoyed too. We chatted for a couple of weeks, and the conversation flowed easily. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. So, against my better judgment, I'm naturally a pretty anxious person, I agreed to a date. He suggested meeting at this local brewery, a place I'd been to a million times. It felt safe, familiar. I even scoped out the spot earlier that day to make sure it wasn't too crowded. When I saw him, he looked just like his pictures, maybe even a little cuter in person. We hugged, got our beers, and found a table outside. The first hour was perfect. We talked about everything: our families, our jobs, our dreams for the future. He was a good listener, asked thoughtful questions, and actually seemed to care about my answers. I started to relax, to let my guard down. Maybe, just maybe, this whole dating app thing wasn't a complete waste of time. Then he started talking about his ex. Red flag number one, right? But I tried to be understanding. Breakups are hard. Maybe he just needed to vent, but the venting turned into something else. He started describing her in detail: her hair, her eyes, the way she laughed. It was weird, uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to nerves. Then he reached into his bag. I thought he was going to pull out his phone, maybe show me a funny meme or something. Instead, he pulled out a small velvet box. My stomach lurched. I thought, oh God, is this really happening? Is he going to propose on the first date? He opened the box, and it wasn't a ring. It was a lock of hair, a long, dark lock of hair tied together with a ribbon. He looked at me, his eyes glistening, and said, "This is hers. I keep it with me always." I didn't know what to say. I was completely speechless. My brain short-circuited. I just stared at the lock of hair, then back at him, my face probably a mask of pure horror. He seemed to misinterpret my silence as some kind of acceptance. He went on to explain how much he loved her, how she was the only woman he would ever love, how she was perfect in every way. He talked about her like she was dead, but he never actually said she was. Then he did something that still makes my skin crawl. He reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "You remind me so much of her. Maybe you could be her replacement." Replacement? The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I finally found my voice, but it was barely a whisper. "What are you talking about?" He smiled, a genuinely unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She disappeared, you see. One day. She was just gone. But you could fill the void. You could be her." That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I stood up, knocking over my beer in the process. I I have to go," I stammered. "I'm not feeling well." He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, still smiling, still holding that lock of hair. I practically ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. I drove home in a daze, replaying the whole date in my head. What had I just experienced? Was this guy delusional? Dangerous? Both? I locked all the doors and windows, double checked the alarm system, and spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch watching terrible reality TV, trying to erase the image of that lock of hair from my mind. The next day, I blocked Alex on every platform imaginable. I even considered changing my phone number. But the worst part was the feeling of being tainted, like I had been exposed to something dark and disturbing. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through a local news website and saw a headline that made my blood run cold. Missing woman case reopened. Police seek person of interest. The article described a woman who had disappeared a few years prior, and the name sounded familiar. It was the same name Alex had mentioned on our date. The person of interest, a man with a description that matched Alex perfectly. They had pictures of him, and I swear, even though I only met him once, I could pick him out of a crowd. I immediately contacted the police and told them everything. I don't know if my testimony helped, but I felt like I had to do something. To this day, I still have nightmares about that lock of hair, about that unsettling smile, um, about the chilling realization that I could have been his next replacement. It was a stark reminder that the world is full of people who are not what they seem, and that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight, swiping right on dating apps. I wish I could forget what happened that day, but I know I never will. It's a lesson etched in my mind, a constant reminder to trust my gut and to never, ever underestimate the darkness that can lurk behind a seemingly normal face. Story number 3. Okay, so I'm not usually one to share stuff like this. I mostly keep it bottled up. But a friend told me that writing it down might help, so here goes nothing. This isn't some monster under the bed kind of horror story. It's the kind that chills you to the bone because it's real. It happened, and it could happen to anyone. It started like any other bad date, really. I was fresh out of a messy breakup, feeling lonely and vulnerable, and downloaded one of those dating apps, Hinge, I think, just swiping through, looking for, I don't know, a distraction, a connection, anything really. I matched with this guy, Mark. He seemed normal enough, good looking, had a decent job, liked hiking and craft beer, all the usual stuff. We chatted for a week or so, nothing too intense, just getting to know each other. He seemed genuinely interested in me, which was a nice change after my ex. We made plans to meet for coffee. He suggested this little cafe downtown, said it was his favorite. I got there first, a little early, and found a table by the window. He showed up about 10 minutes later, and right away, something felt off. He looked different than his pictures, older, somehow tired. But I brushed it off, chalked it up to bad lighting or something. The conversation started okay. We talked about work, our hobbies, that kind of thing. But then he started asking really personal questions way too soon. Like digging into my past relationship, asking about my family, my finances. It felt like an interrogation, not a date. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept bringing it back to me, me, me. He was like a black hole, sucking all the energy out of the room. Then he started getting intense. He'd stare at me for too long without blinking, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. He'd make these little comments. He'd make these little comments like you could use someone to take care of you, or you're the kind of girl who needs a strong man. It was creepy, possessive. I started getting that feeling in the pit of my stomach, Frey, that little voice in the back of my head screaming, "Get out of here." I made some excuse about having to meet a friend and said I had to leave. He didn't try to stop me, just smiled that dead-eyed smile and said, "I'll call you." I practically ran out of that cafe, feeling like I couldn't breathe until I was a few blocks away. I blocked his number, deleted him from the app, and tried to forget the whole thing. But that's when it got weird. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Little things at first. Like I'd see the same car parked down the street from my apartment building, a dark sedan with tinted windows. I'd walk past it and the hair on the back of my neck would stand up. Then I started getting these weird phone calls, just silence on the other end. I'd pick up, say hello, and there'd be nothing but static. After a few seconds, they'd hang up. I checked my caller ID, but the number was always blocked. I started feeling like I was being watched. I'd catch glimpses of someone out of the corner of my eye, a figure disappearing behind a tree or ducking into a doorway. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that I was being paranoid after the bad date, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Then one night I came home from work and found my apartment door unlocked. I knew I had locked it when I left that morning. I always do. I crept inside, heart pounding, and checked every room. Nothing was missing, nothing seemed out of place. But there was this scent in the air, this faint, musky smell that I couldn't identify. It made me feel sick to my stomach. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do without any evidence of a break in. They suggested I change my locks and install a security system. I did both. I thought that would be the end of it, that whatever was happening would stop. But I was wrong. A few days later, I got a package in the mail, no return address, just my name and address printed on the label. I opened it, and inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me taken through my living room window. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, completely unaware that someone was watching me. Scrawled across the back of the photo in red ink were the words, "I told you I'd call." That was it. That was the moment I completely lost it. I went to the police again, showed them the photo, told them everything that had been happening. This time they took me seriously. They opened an investigation, but they couldn't find anything. No fingerprints on the package, no leads, nothing. It was like Mark had vanished into thin air. I ended up moving, changing my name, cutting off contact with almost everyone I knew. I live in a different state now, with a different life. But I still look over my shoulder. I still have nightmares. I still can't shake the feeling that he's out there, somewhere, waiting. I learned a hard lesson, that evil can be hidden behind a charming smile, that danger can be just a swipe away, and that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that look just like us. Story number 4. Okay, so this happened to my best friend, Sarah. I'm telling it from my perspective because she still can't really talk about it without getting super freaked out. And honestly, I get it. Looking back, all the red flags were practically waving a parade in our faces. But at the time, she was so blinded by, well, I guess infatuation is the only word for it. Sarah's always been a bit of a romantic, always searching for that spark in a relationship. She met Mark online on one of those dating sites that caters to people looking for something serious. His profile seemed perfect. He was a writer, loved hiking, and his pictures showed him volunteering at an animal shelter. She's a sucker for a guy who loves animals. They messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks before meeting up. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. The first date went great. They talked for hours, laughing and finding common ground. Sarah called me that night, practically buzzing with excitement. "I think he's the one," she said, which, knowing Sarah, wasn't that unusual. But this time, it felt different, more intense. The red flags started subtly, almost masked as quirks. He was overly attentive, texting her constantly, wanting to know what she was doing every minute of the day. At first, she found it endearing, like he couldn't get enough of her. But it quickly turned into possessiveness. He didn't like her spending time with her friends, especially me. He'd make these little comments like, "I miss you already," or "Are you sure you want to go out? I was planning a special night for us." He started subtly isolating her. If we made plans, he'd conveniently schedule something else for her, something she couldn't miss, or he'd just guilt trip her into staying home with him. I noticed she started canceling on me more and more often, always with some elaborate excuse. Then there was the jealousy. He'd get jealous if she even mentioned another guy, even just a coworker or a cashier at the grocery store. He'd grill her about it, demanding to know every detail of their interaction. She started censoring herself, avoiding any mention of other men altogether. One time we were at a coffee shop and she got a text from him. Her face fell as she read it. "Everything okay?" I asked. She sighed. "He's upset that I didn't text him back for an hour. He thinks I'm ignoring him." I told her that was insane, that he needed to give her some space. But she just shrugged. "He just cares about me so much," she said. Blinded, I tell you. Completely blinded. The creepiest thing was his knowledge of her routine. He always seemed to know where she was, even when she hadn't told him. She'd be at the gym and he'd text her, "Hope you had a good workout." Or she'd be at her favorite bookstore and he'd text, "Find any good reads today?" It was like he was watching her. She brushed it off, saying it was just coincidence. But I started getting seriously worried. I tried to talk to her about it, to tell her that his behavior was not normal, that it was controlling and obsessive, but she wouldn't listen. She was convinced that he loved her, that he was just passionate. The breaking point came a few months into the relationship. Sarah came over to my apartment, visibly shaken. She had dark circles under her eyes and her hands were trembling. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows about the email." Apparently, she had been emailing a former colleague about a potential job opportunity. She hadn't told Mark about it because she knew he wouldn't approve. But somehow, he had found out. He confronted her, accusing her of lying and betraying him. He knew specific details from the email, things she hadn't told anyone. She was terrified. She finally realized that he had been spying on her, reading her emails, tracking her phone. He had violated her privacy in the most extreme way possible. I urged her to leave him immediately, to call the police. She did, but it wasn't easy. He bombarded her with calls and texts, begging her to forgive him, promising to change. He even showed up at her apartment, banging on the door and screaming her name. She had to get a restraining order. Even after the restraining order, he didn't stop. He started sending her letters, long, like rambling messages filled with apologies and declarations of love. He'd leave gifts on her doorstep, flowers, stuffed animals, creepy little trinkets. Sarah lived in constant fear. She changed her phone number, her email address, even her route to work. She installed security cameras in her apartment and started carrying pepper spray. She was a shell of her former self, constantly looking over her shoulder, afraid of what he might do next. The police were helpful, but their hands were tied. They couldn't arrest him unless he violated the restraining order. And he was careful, always staying just within the bounds of the law. Finally, after months of torment, he disappeared. He just stopped contacting her, stopped leaving gifts, stopped being a constant presence in her life. She never found out where he went or why he stopped. But she was finally able to breathe again. It's been a few years since then. Sarah's doing much better now. She's in therapy, working through the trauma of what happened. She's slowly starting to trust people again, but she's still incredibly cautious. The whole experience was a wake-up call for both of us. We learned to recognize the red flags early on, to trust our instincts, and to never ignore those little warning signs that something isn't right. Because sometimes the person who seems perfect is actually the person you should be most afraid of. And love shouldn't be obsessive, controlling, or frightening. It should never feel like walking on eggshells. That's not love, that's a trap. Story number 5. Okay, so listen up because I need to tell someone about this. It's not your typical jump scare, slasher flick dating horror. It's more insidious, the kind that slowly eats away at your soul and leaves you questioning your sanity. I'm calling it the long con because that's what it was, a masterfully orchestrated, years-long deception that I'm still trying to untangle. It started like any other online dating story. I was in my late 20s, career-focused, and honestly too tired to put myself out there in the real world. Hinge seemed like the easiest option. I swiped right on a guy named David. His profile was generic, but in a reassuring way. Decent photos, not too filtered, not too staged. A bio that mentioned hiking, cooking, and a vaguely artistic job. Nothing that screamed red flag. We matched, chatted for a bit, and then met up for coffee. He was exactly as he presented himself online, pleasant, polite, and seemingly normal. He asked about my job, my family, my hobbies. He listened attentively, made eye contact, and remembered details from previous conversations. He ticked all the boxes of a good guy. We started dating. He was consistent, reliable, and genuinely seemed interested in me. He planned thoughtful dates, remembered my birthday, and was always there when I needed him. My friends liked him, my family liked him, I liked him. He was everything I thought I wanted. Fast forward a year. We were living together, talking about marriage, the whole shebang. He was supportive of my career, encouraged me to pursue my passions, and made me feel like I could conquer the world. He was, in every sense of the word, my partner. Then, things started getting weird. Subtle things at first, things I brushed off as stress or exhaustion. He started becoming more secretive with his phone. He'd get up in the middle of the night to take calls, whispering in hushed tones. He started working later hours, claiming his job was becoming more demanding. I tried talking to him about it, but he'd always deflect, saying I was being paranoid and that everything was fine. I wanted to believe him, but my gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. So I did something I'm not proud of. I snooped. I waited until he was asleep, grabbed his phone, and unlocked it with his fingerprint. I know, terrible, but I needed to know. What I found was a rabbit hole of deception that made my head spin. He wasn't who he said he was. The job he claimed to have? Fake. The family he talked about? Fabricated. The interests he shared with me? All researched and regurgitated to mirror my own. It was like he'd created a persona specifically designed to appeal to me. The phone records revealed hundreds of calls and texts to various unknown numbers. I scrolled through some of the messages, piecing together fragments of conversations. They were talking about me, about how close he was to achieving his goal, about how compliant I was. That's when the pieces started falling into place. The sudden interest in my finances, the subtle suggestions to invest in lucrative opportunities, the way he always steered conversations toward my family's assets. It all clicked. He wasn't in love with me. He was using me. I was a mark in some elaborate con. But what was the goal? I didn't have millions stashed away. My family wasn't wealthy. What was he after? I didn't confront him right away. I was scared. I needed time to process what I'd discovered and figure out a plan. I started documenting everything, gathering evidence, and contacting a lawyer. The next few weeks were excruciating. I had to act normal, pretend that everything was fine, while secretly plotting my escape. It was like living a double life, constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then, one night, he came home with a proposition. He'd been offered a dream job overseas, he said, and he wanted me to come with him. It was a remote island, a chance for a fresh start, a life of luxury. All I had to do was sell my apartment and invest the proceeds in his business venture. That's when I knew I had to act. I told him I needed time to think about it, that I'd give him my answer in a few days. He seemed disappointed, but didn't push it. The next morning, I packed a bag, gathered my documents, and left. I went straight to the police and laid everything out. They were skeptical at first, but the evidence I'd collected was undeniable. They launched an investigation, and what they uncovered was even more disturbing than I could have imagined. David was a professional con artist, part of a larger network of scammers who preyed on vulnerable women. He'd been running this scam for years, targeting women like me, successful, independent, but also lonely and looking for love. The police arrested him a few weeks later. He's currently awaiting trial, facing multiple charges of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. But the damage is done. I lost more than just money. I lost my trust, my sense of security, my belief in the goodness of people. It's been 2 years since I left him, and I'm still struggling to rebuild my life. So here's my warning to anyone using online dating apps. Be careful. Don't be naive. Don't let your desire for connection blind you to the red flags. Do your research, trust your gut, and never ever give anyone complete control over your life. Because sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding in the shadows. They're the ones smiling right in your face, telling you exactly what you want to hear. And they're playing the long con, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I'm still trying to learn to live again, and I truly hope this helps someone else. Story number 6. Okay, so this is hard to talk about. Even now, years later, I still get this hollow feeling in my chest when I think about it. It wasn't a jump scare kind of horror, more like a slow burn, soul crushing realization that the person I thought I knew didn't exist and that I was way more vulnerable than I ever imagined. I met Ben online on one of those dating sites that tries to be more serious than Tinder. He seemed normal. Maybe that was the problem. He was a software engineer, liked hiking, volunteered at an animal shelter, the kind of guy you'd bring home to your parents. We chatted for a few weeks, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He wasn't pushy, he listened, and he actually remembered things I told him. It was refreshing. Our first date was at a small Italian place. He was even better in person, attentive, funny, and genuinely seemed to enjoy my company. We talked for hours, and I felt this weird sense of relief, like I'd finally found someone who wasn't just looking for a hookup or a casual fling. He walked me home, kissed me goodnight, and it was all very textbook perfect. The next few months were great. We went on hikes, saw movies, cooked dinner together. He was always there for me, a steady presence in my life. He even helped me through a tough time at work, listening patiently to my complaints and offering practical advice. I started to fall for him hard. Then things started to get off. Subtle at first. He started asking more questions about my past, specifically about my previous relationships. Not in a jealous way, more like he was collecting data. He'd ask about the details, the breakups, the vulnerabilities I had. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured he was just trying to understand me better. But then he started mirroring me. I'd mention a band I liked, and suddenly he was a huge fan. I'd talk about a book I enjoyed, and he'd have read it and formed opinions that conveniently aligned with mine. It was like he was trying to become my perfect match, a reflection of everything I wanted. It was flattering at first, but then it started to feel creepy, like he was studying me, trying to figure out how to manipulate me. And then he started isolating me. He'd subtly discourage me from spending time with my friends, saying things like, "Don't you think they're a little negative?" Or "You deserve better friends than that." He always made it sound like he was looking out for me, protecting me from the world, but it was actually cutting me off from my support system. One day I was at his apartment and I needed to use his computer. He was in the shower, so I figured it was okay. I opened his browser, and the first thing I saw was a search history filled with my name. Not just my name, but my social media profiles, my family members, my address, my work history, everything. It was like he had been obsessively researching me. I felt sick to my stomach. I started clicking through the tabs, and that's when I found it, a detailed document outlining my personality, my fears, my insecurities, my desires. It was like a psychological profile, but written by someone who knew me intimately. There were notes about how to manipulate me, how to make me feel secure, how to exploit my vulnerabilities. It was terrifying. I didn't say anything when he got out of the shower. I just acted normal, finished using his computer, and left. I couldn't bring myself to confront him. I was too scared. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to make sense of it. The mirroring, the isolation, the obsessive questions, it all clicked into place. He wasn't who he said he was. He was a predator, meticulously crafting a persona to lure me in. The next day, I blocked him on everything: phone, email, social media. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and told my friends and family what had happened. I went to the police, but there wasn't much they could do. He hadn't technically broken any laws. It was just creepy. I never heard from him again, but the experience changed me. I became hypervigilant, suspicious of everyone. I stopped dating for a long time. The worst part is the feeling of being violated, of having my trust betrayed in such a calculated way. I still struggle with it. I still wonder what his motives were. I was lucky that I found out before things escalated further. Some people aren't so lucky. I am still shaken up and struggle on occasion to this day. I am still learning how to trust people. And I still find myself looking over my shoulder from time to time. I still get flashbacks and get easily frightened. This is just one story. There are many more people out there like him who have done worse and continue to hurt people. Dating can be horrible. Story number 7. Okay, here goes nothing. I've never told anyone this, not even my closest friends. It's not a ghost story or anything supernatural, but it messed me up real bad, and sometimes I still catch myself looking over my shoulder. It started innocently enough on OkCupid. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of a really bad breakup, and looking for, well, I didn't really know what I was looking for. Validation? Maybe? A distraction? Definitely not what I found. His name was Daniel, and his profile was normal, maybe even a little boring. He was a few years older than me, worked in IT, liked hiking and craft beer. His pictures were decent, if a little generic. No obvious red flags, which honestly was a welcome change from some of the creeps I'd encountered on that app. We messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks, and he seemed genuinely nice, intelligent, and even a little shy. We had a lot in common: similar taste in music, books, movies. He wasn't overly aggressive or pushy, and he actually seemed interested in getting to know me before asking me out. So I agreed to meet him for coffee. The coffee date was fine. He was a little more awkward in person than he'd seemed online, but he was still pleasant enough. We talked for a couple of hours, and the conversation flowed pretty easily. There wasn't any instant spark or anything, but I didn't feel any reason to write him off completely. I figured I'd give him another shot. That's where things started to get weird. Our second date was a walk in a local park. It was a beautiful day, and the park was crowded with people. We walked along the trails, talking and laughing. He seemed more relaxed this time, and I started to feel more comfortable around him. But then he started asking me really specific questions about my daily routine: what time I left for work, what route I took, what time I usually got home. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just trying to make conversation, but the questions kept coming, and they became increasingly detailed. He asked about my apartment building, how many entrances there were, what kind of security system it had, if I had a balcony. That's when the alarm bells started ringing in my head. I tried to brush it off, chalk it up to my own paranoia, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started giving vague answers, trying to steer the conversation in a different direction. But he kept pressing me, asking the same questions in different ways. It was subtle, but persistent. The date ended on a weird note. He walked me back to my car, and as I was getting in, he said, "You know, I really like knowing where you are. It makes me feel connected." That sent a shiver down my spine. I went home and immediately blocked him on everything. OkCupid, phone, social media, everything. I didn't want anything to do with him. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had dodged a bullet. The next few weeks were uneventful. I didn't hear from him, and I started to relax, thinking that maybe I had been wrong about him. Then one evening, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I froze. I knew I had locked it when I left that morning. I always do. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The apartment was silent. Everything seemed to be in its place. But then I noticed something: a single rose lying on my kitchen counter. It wasn't just any rose. It was a specific type of rose that I had mentioned to Daniel on our first date. My favorite kind. I hadn't told anyone else about that. I grabbed the rose, my hands shaking, and ran out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I reached my best friend's place, a few blocks away. I told her everything about Daniel, the questions, the unlocked door, the rose. She was just as freaked out as I was. We called the police, but they couldn't do much. There was no sign of forced entry, and nothing was missing. They took a report, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to launch a full investigation. I didn't feel safe in my apartment anymore. I stayed at my friend's place for a few days, and then I made the decision to move. I broke my lease, packed up my things, and found a new place in a different part of the city. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, except for my best friend and my family. I thought I was safe. I thought I had escaped him. A few months later, I was walking home from work one evening when I saw him. He was standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost, watching me. I froze. I couldn't move. He just stood there, smiling. Not a friendly smile, a knowing smile, a predatory smile. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at each other. It felt like an eternity. Finally, I snapped out of it and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back, until I reached my apartment building. I locked the door behind me, and I didn't leave for days. I reported the incident to the police, but again, they couldn't do much. He hadn't done anything illegal. He was just standing there. I started carrying pepper spray with me everywhere I went. I changed my routine, varied my routes, and always made sure to be aware of my surroundings. I was constantly on edge, terrified that he would show up again. I never saw him again after that day, but the fear never really went away. It's been years now, and I still find myself looking over my shoulder, wondering if he's still out there, watching me. I don't know what Daniel wanted from me. I don't know if he was just a harmless creep or something more sinister. But I know that he completely shattered my sense of safety and security. I'm more careful now. I'm more guarded. I don't trust people as easily as I used to. And I'll never, ever forget the look on his face that day, standing across the street, watching me. It's a look that still haunts my dreams. I still don't know how he found my apartment. Story number 8. I'll never forget the feeling of dread when I realized I'd put my trust in a total stranger who had every intention of dismantling my life, piece by piece. It wasn't a dramatic one-night encounter or a sudden violent act. It was a slow burn, a calculated manipulation disguised as romance that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. It started like any other modern romance, a dating app, mutual attraction, and a string of promising dates. Liam was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He remembered details from our conversations, asked thoughtful questions, and made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He had a stable job, a cute dog, and a seemingly endless supply of witty banter. He was exactly what I was looking for after a string of disappointing relationships. We bonded over our shared love of hiking and spent weekends exploring trails in the nearby mountains. He'd pack us elaborate picnics, point out interesting flora and fauna, and tell me stories about his childhood adventures. It felt idyllic, like something out of a movie. I was completely smitten. The first red flag was subtle, almost imperceptible. It was a comment he made about my friends, suggesting they were distracting me from our relationship. He framed it as concern, saying he just wanted us to have more time together to deepen our connection. I brushed it off, thinking he was just a little insecure. But then it started escalating. He began criticizing my clothing choices, suggesting I dress more classically to better suit his tastes. He'd make snide remarks about my career aspirations, implying that I should focus on being a supportive partner rather than pursuing my own ambitions. He isolated me from my support system, planting seeds of doubt and insecurity until I began to believe that I needed him to be happy. He started scrutinizing my social media activity, questioning who I was talking to and why. He'd accuse me of flirting with other men, even when I was just interacting with coworkers or family members. He'd gaslight me, twisting my words and actions until I doubted my own sanity. I'd find myself apologizing for things I didn't even do, just to keep the peace. The control extended to my finances. He convinced me to open a joint bank account, promising it would simplify our lives. He then proceeded to micromanage my spending, questioning every purchase and making me feel guilty for buying anything for myself. He made it clear that his money was our money, but my money was just mine. I remember one particularly vivid incident. I had planned a weekend getaway with my best friend, Sarah, a trip we had been looking forward to for months. Liam feigned disappointment, saying he had been planning a surprise for me that weekend. He guilt-tripped me relentlessly, telling me how selfish I was being for prioritizing my friend over him. He cried, he begged, he made me feel like the worst person in the world. I caved. I canceled the trip with Sarah, sacrificing my own happiness to appease him. Looking back, I can't believe how easily he manipulated me. I was so desperate for his approval that I was willing to betray my own values and abandon my friends. The emotional abuse took a toll on my mental and physical health. I became anxious, depressed, and withdrawn. I lost weight, stopped sleeping, and developed chronic headaches. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly trying to anticipate his moods and avoid triggering his anger. One day I was scrolling through his phone when he was in the shower. I know it was a violation of his privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I found messages to other women, explicit and suggestive. He had been cheating on me the entire time, painting me as crazy or unstable whenever they asked questions. That was my breaking point. The betrayal shattered the illusion of love and trust that he had so carefully constructed. I felt a surge of anger and resentment that finally gave me the courage to leave. Leaving wasn't easy. He tried to manipulate me, threaten me, and guilt-trip me into staying. He even threatened to harm himself if I left him, but I knew that I had to escape. I confided in my friend Sarah, who had always been suspicious of Liam. She helped me pack my things and move into a new apartment far away from him. I cut off all contact with Liam, blocked him on social media, and changed my phone number. I went to therapy to deal with the emotional trauma and rebuild my self-esteem. It took a long time to heal, but I eventually realized that I was stronger and more resilient than I ever thought possible. The experience with Liam taught me some valuable lessons about the red flags of abusive relationships. It taught me to trust my instincts, prioritize my own happiness, and never let anyone control my life. Even now, years later, I still have moments of doubt and insecurity. I find myself second guessing my decisions and wondering if I'm good enough. But I remind myself of what I went through and how far I've come. I'm no longer the naive, insecure woman who fell under Liam's spell. I'm a survivor, and I'll never forget the feeling of dread that led me to finally break free. It was the catalyst for a new beginning, a chance to reclaim my life and build a future on my own terms. It was my wake-up call. Story number 9. Okay, you are not going to believe this. I swear on everything. This is a true story. It happened last year, and I still get chills thinking about it. I've always been a bit of a hopeless romantic, so I figured I'd try online dating again. I'd had my fair share of awkward dates, but nothing terrifying until Mark. We matched on this app called Linked Hearts, which I thought sounded promising because it was supposed to be for people looking for serious relationships. Mark seemed perfect. He was a doctor, liked hiking and dogs, and actually put effort into his messages. Not just, hey, or you're hot, but real questions and thoughtful responses. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested this cafe downtown, a pretty popular spot, so I felt safe enough. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, dark hair, kind eyes. We talked for hours, and the conversation flowed so easily. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I was actually giddy when I got home. I hadn't felt that spark in ages. We went out again a few days later, this time for dinner. It was just as great as the first date. He was a total gentleman, paid for everything, and walked me back to my car. He even opened the door for me. I was starting to fall hard. After the third date, I was completely smitten. We went to a concert in the park, held hands, and even shared a sweet kiss at the end of the night. It felt like something out of a movie. This is where things started to get weird. He started texting me constantly. Not just a few messages throughout the day, but like nonstop. If I didn't respond within a few minutes, he'd send another message asking if I was okay. It was a little overwhelming, but I chalked it up to him being really into me. I figured, okay, he just really likes me. A little clingy, but harmless, right? Wrong. A week after our third date, he asked me to be his girlfriend. It felt way too soon, but I was so caught up in the romance of it all that I said yes. I know. Huge mistake. But I really liked him and I didn't want to ruin things. That's when the possessiveness kicked into high gear. He wanted to know where I was at all times. He'd call me multiple times a day, demanding to know who I was with and what I was doing. He got jealous if I spent time with my friends or family. He even started showing up unannounced at my apartment. One time, I was having dinner with my sister and he just walked in like he owned the place. He said he was just checking on me and gave me this creepy, intense stare. My sister was freaked out. I was starting to get really scared, but I didn't know how to break up with him. I was afraid of what he might do. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a post from one of my friends. It was a picture of her and her boyfriend at a new restaurant downtown. I commented on the picture, saying how cute they looked. A few minutes later, Mark called me, absolutely furious. He accused me of flirting with my friend's boyfriend and said I was trying to make him jealous. I tried to explain that I was just being friendly, but he wouldn't listen. He started yelling at me, calling me names and saying he didn't trust me. I hung up on him, shaking and crying. I knew I had to end things, no matter how scared I was. The next day, I mustered up the courage to call him. I told him I couldn't be in a relationship with him anymore, that it wasn't working out. He didn't say anything at first. Then he started to cry. He begged me to give him another chance, said he would change, that he loved me too much to lose me. I stood firm, though. I told him it was over and hung up. I thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. For the next few weeks, he bombarded me with messages and calls. I blocked his number, but he kept creating new accounts to contact me. He'd leave voicemails begging me to talk to him, saying he couldn't live without me. It was terrifying. I started seeing him everywhere. I'd be walking down the street, and he'd be across the road just staring at me. I'd be driving home from work, and he'd be behind me in his car. I felt like I was being stalked. I was afraid to leave my apartment. One night, I woke up to a strange noise outside my window. I peered through the blinds and saw him standing in my backyard, holding a bouquet of roses. He was just standing there, staring up at my window. I screamed and called the police. They came and took him away, but he was released the next day. I was living in a real nightmare. I knew I had to do something drastic. I filed a restraining order against him. It was a long and difficult process, but I finally got it. He wasn't allowed to come within 100 feet of me or contact me in any way. For a while, it worked. I didn't see or hear from him for months. I started to feel safe again. Then last week, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, wrapped gift. I opened it cautiously and found a single dried rose with a note attached. The note just said, "I'm always watching." I nearly fainted. I don't know how he found my new address. I don't know what he's planning, but I'm terrified. I've contacted the police again, but they said there's not much they can do unless he violates the restraining order. So that's my story. I went on a dating app, met a seemingly perfect guy, and ended up being stalked by a possessive psycho. Be careful out there, people. You never know who you're really talking to, and trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. I wish I had. Now, I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I don't feel safe in my own home. One bad date has changed my life forever. I just hope he never finds me again. This is why I stick to staying at home and watching TV. Story number 10. Okay, so I met him on Bumble. Classic, right? His profile was normal, maybe a little too normal. Picture with a dog, hiking picture, one where he's holding a fish, the whole 9 yards. His bio was something generic like looking for someone to explore the city with. Pizza and good conversation are a must. I was bored swiping while watching Netflix, and he seemed harmless enough. We matched, he messaged me first, and we started chatting. He was fine, perfectly fine. Maybe that was the problem. He was so aggressively, blandly normal that it almost felt off. But I ignored that little voice in the back of my head. I'd been on so many terrible dates, maybe I was just used to expecting the worst. We talked for a few days, mostly surface level stuff. He worked in IT, liked craft beer, and was really into fantasy novels. I told him about my job in marketing, my love for true crime podcasts, and my embarrassing obsession with reality TV. He seemed engaged, asked follow up questions, and generally acted like a normal human being. So when he suggested we grab dinner, I said yes. We met at this trendy Italian place downtown. He was on time, held the door open for me, and even complimented my dress. I remember thinking, okay, maybe I judged him too harshly. Maybe he's actually a decent guy. The dinner started off well. We talked about our jobs, our families, and our hobbies. He was a good listener, didn't interrupt me, and even laughed at my jokes. But as the evening went on, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He began asking me really personal questions, things you wouldn't normally ask on a first date. Like, what were my biggest insecurities? What was my biggest fear? Had I ever been betrayed by someone I loved? Um, I brushed it off at first, chalking it up to him being a little awkward and trying to be deep. But then the questions got darker. He asked if I'd ever thought about what it would be like to disappear, if I ever felt like I was being watched, if I believed in the supernatural. I started to feel really uncomfortable. The restaurant was crowded and loud, but I felt like we were in a bubble, like everyone else had faded away and it was just me and him and his unsettling questions. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but he kept circling back to the dark stuff. He started talking about how much he admired people who were strong enough to embrace their dark side, people who weren't afraid to explore the shadows of their own minds. He stared at me intensely when he said this, and I had to avoid eye contact. My stomach felt like it had dropped to my feet. When he finished his monologue, he kept watching me, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched on forever. Then he said, "You know, some people just aren't made for the light." That's when I decided I needed to get out of there. I made some excuse about having an early morning and needing to get home. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't argue. He walked me to my car, and as I was getting in, he leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "I'll be seeing you again." I drove home as fast as I could, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I kept checking my rearview mirror, convinced he was following me. When I finally got to my apartment, I locked the door, bolted it, and then checked every window to make sure they were locked. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak and groan of the building sounded like footsteps outside my door. Every shadow seemed to move and shift in the darkness. I kept replaying the dinner in my head, trying to figure out what had just happened. Had I just gone on a date with a complete psychopath? The next morning, I blocked his number and unmatched him on Bumble. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I started getting weird emails. They were just strings of random letters and numbers, but they were always sent from different untraceable email addresses. I changed my email password and set up a spam filter, but the emails kept coming. Then came the phone calls. Silent calls, always late at night. I'd answer, and there would be nothing but static on the other end. I blocked the numbers, but they kept calling from different numbers. I even considered changing my number, but I had had it for years. The idea of changing it because of some creep I went on one date with made me furious. It went on like this for weeks. The emails, the phone calls, the feeling of being watched. I was constantly on edge, terrified to leave my apartment. I started seeing a therapist who helped me process my anxiety and develop coping mechanisms. But the feeling of dread never really went away. One evening, I was walking home from work. As I was about to unlock my front door, I noticed something strange. There was a small black object lying on my doorstep. I bent down to pick it up, and that's when I realized what it was. It was a fish, a dead fish, the same kind of fish he was holding in his dating profile. I screamed, dropped the fish, and ran inside. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do. No proof, no witnesses, nothing. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay at a friend's house. I didn't go back to my apartment for weeks. I eventually moved to a new city, changed my number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I haven't heard from him since. But even now, years later, I still get a shiver down my spine whenever I think about that date. The way he looked at me, the things he said, the dead fish on my doorstep. I'll never know what his intentions were or how far he was willing to go, but I know that I'll never forget him, and I know that I'll never use a dating app again. My heart still races when I remember it. Story number 11. I thought it was just my imagination until I started finding the Polaroids. Let me back up. I'd been divorced for about a year, and after a painful period of mourning my marriage, I decided to dip my toes back into the dating pool. Everyone told me to get on the apps, so I did. Bumble seemed less predatory than the others, so I created a profile. You know the drill. Curated photos, a witty bio, and a hopeful swipe right. That's how I met Julian. He was charming, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for a couple of weeks before deciding to meet up. Our first date was at a cozy bookstore cafe. He arrived early, holding a single rose. Corny? Maybe. But I was instantly smitten. He listened intently as I talked about my job, my love of old movies, and my complicated relationship with my family. He, in turn, shared stories about his work as a graphic designer, his passion for photography, and his close-knit group of friends. We dated for about 3 months and things moved quickly. We spent almost every weekend together. He cooked elaborate meals, introduced me to new music, and made me laugh until my sides hurt. He was attentive, thoughtful, and incredibly romantic. It felt like I had stepped into a movie. Maybe a movie where everything was just a little too perfect. He had a cool apartment downtown, all exposed brick and modern furniture. It was impeccably clean, almost sterile. The only personal touch was his photography equipment. He had cameras, lenses, and lighting setups everywhere. He explained that he was working on a personal project and was always experimenting with new techniques. It was after I started spending nights at his place that things got strange. At first, it was little things. Waking up in the middle of the night to find him standing by the window, just staring out at the city. When I'd ask what he was doing, he'd say he couldn't sleep, or that he was thinking. I brushed it off as him being a bit of a night owl. Then there were the dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams where I was being watched. In the dreams, I would always wake up in a dark room feeling a presence nearby but unable to see anything. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing. I started to feel uneasy in his apartment, like I was being observed. I chalked it up to adjusting to a new space, being in a new relationship. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling persisted. One Saturday morning, Julian went out to pick up pastries for breakfast. While he was gone, I decided to tidy up a bit. I was putting away some of his photography equipment when I stumbled upon a box tucked away in the back of a closet. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside were the Polaroids. They were pictures of me, sleeping. There were dozens of them, each one taken from a different angle. each one capturing me in a vulnerable, unconscious state. Some were close-ups of my face, others were full-body shots. They were all taken while I was completely unaware. My blood ran cold. I scrambled to close the box, my hands shaking. I felt sick to my stomach, violated in a way I couldn't even articulate. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed with fear. Julian came back a few minutes later, humming a song and carrying a bag of pastries. He seemed completely normal, completely oblivious to the horror I had just uncovered. "Hey, you," he said, smiling. "Got your favorite." I forced a smile back, trying to act normal, but my voice trembled when I spoke. "Hey, thanks." I knew I couldn't stay there, not for another minute. I made up an excuse about needing to get back to my apartment. I said I had a family emergency. He seemed disappointed but understanding. He walked me to the door, kissed me goodbye, and told me he'd call me later. I barely made it down the street before I burst into tears. I went straight to the police station. I told them everything, showed them the Polaroids. They took it seriously, but said they needed a warrant to search his apartment. They told me to stay away from him, to not contact him under any circumstances. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced he was watching me. The police eventually got a warrant and searched his apartment. They found more Polaroids, not just of me, but of other women as well. They also found a hidden room behind a bookcase, a room filled with surveillance equipment. He had been recording everything. Julian was arrested and charged with stalking and voyeurism. He pleaded guilty and is now serving a prison sentence. Even though he's behind bars, I still feel the effects of what happened. I have trouble trusting people, especially men. I'm constantly paranoid that someone is watching me. I have nightmares about those Polaroids. I thought I was just imagining things. I thought I was being overly sensitive, overly cautious. But I wasn't. My instincts were right. And now I'll always trust my gut, no matter how irrational it may seem, because sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones that hide in plain sight behind a charming smile and a single rose. She thought it was just a bad date until she found the second phone hidden under her bed. Some people swipe left, others follow you home. If you're still listening, maybe you're not alone after all. This is Hollow Testament. We'll see you in the next nightmare.